Hello and welcome to episode 366 of AvTalk. I am Ian Petchnick, here as always with
Jason Rabinowitz. How's it going, Ian? We have a special, some might even say honorable guest on the podcast today, and his name is Seth Miller.
Hey, guys.
Hey, Seth. Welcome back to the show. Thanks so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Great to be back.
So we are in Hamburg, Germany. Once again, I didn't make it last year. Very unfortunate. But we are back in action for the Aircraft Interior Expo. It is currently day 2 or day 3. I don't really remember. I'm very tired. These days are very long. But we've seen some interesting stuff, some not very interesting stuff.
That's what we're mostly going to talk about, though. So you got that to look forward to shortly.
Yes, the not interesting stuff is more like the stuff
the not interesting stuff.
But that's where a lot of the information is, unfortunately.
To be fair, one of the not interesting things is actually very interesting. We'll have to explain that. But first,
we'll get back to all of that, but we've got other things to discuss.
We've got other things to discuss because one of them is happening right now. So it'll be completely over by the time the podcast comes out.
Days old on
Friday. But today, this very moment, American Airlines is celebrating its 100th anniversary. So a very happy 100th anniversary to American Airlines. They are celebrating with a special flight from Chicago to St. Louis, retracing the original flight that they operated on April 15th, 1926, using a much different aircraft. This is a 737 this time around, but it's in the airline's 100th anniversary livery. And what they've also done today is finally joined the trading card airline club.
Yes, finally.
Releasing a whole pack
of the major U.S. airlines to do this. Delta and United have been doing it for quite a while. I have quite the collection of those. But American finally getting in on it with some historical twists.
Yeah, they've got the original DC-3. They have the 707. And their individual registrations on the cards, which is a bit different than what other airlines have done. Yeah, they do. They're all legit. So the DC-3 that they have is the 13th DC-3 ever built and one of the first to fly for American. The 707 is the first 707 that American took delivery of. The MD-80 that they have on there is the registration that operated the final MD-80 revenue service for American Airlines. The A321neo, it's just the first A321neo they took. The 777-300ER is one that is currently wearing the Astrojet Heritage livery. The 737-800 is the 100th anniversary livery. And the 787-9P is the first 787-9P, the super premium version.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. On the back of it, they have a bunch of aircraft specifications, aircraft highlights, which is, I think, more than you find on the back of the United or Delta cards. American says they have printed more than 7 million trading cards in time for summer travel, which is pretty cool. You can pick them up by doing a social interaction with a pilot on board the aircraft, but only on American mainline flights. So my upcoming flights on Eagle, even though they are wholly owned subsidiaries, for most of them, they are apparently not participating. And I think that's a little unfair. Eagle deserves some
Maybe you get like a little card.
Yeah. Oh, a mini card. Ooh. Express card.
Yeah. Express card. Well, on the other side of things, and also happening at this very moment, we are in the midst of 5 days of back-to-back-to-back Lufthansa strikes.
They are also celebrating their 100th anniversary in the typical
today, right? I think
it's also today.
It's also today. I think I got a release today that they finally opened their new conference center in, was it Frankfurt, Munich? That has the aircraft they moved from, was it Super Connie, right? They moved the Super Connie and the Ju-52 there, I believe.
Yes,
and they finally opened that on their celebrating day of 100, which is between one strike before another begins, after another one earlier this week. This is not.
And there will be overlapping strikes.
Fantastic.
That's what is just, I mean, they're really covering all the bases here. We've got the Lufthansa pilots were striking Monday, Tuesday. The Lufthansa cabin crew are striking Wednesday, Thursday, and the pilots are also striking Thursday and Friday. So 5 straight days
on Friday. So that actually changes things for us a little bit.
Yeah, we're both not entirely sure how we were going to, I think neither of us is flying Lufthansa, so getting out of Germany shouldn't be a problem, but we had some concerns about crowds at the airport.
Yeah.
It sounds like those won't exist.
Yeah, this has actually been a pretty big plot line here at AIX in Hamburg this year, because the first day or two, attendance was really, really down, and we couldn't really peg, is it going to be like this all week? Is it because people and airline employees specifically aren't traveling because of the war in the Middle East, which we know some airlines are not doing duty travel? Or did everyone just get Lufthansa'd? And then did their plans also then get derailed by Deutsche Bahn, which is also a thing? So really getting around Germany right now is worse than usual, which is really hard. But there's been an actual material impact to the show here where a lot of people showed up late or not at all just because of the back-to-back-to-back Lufthansa strikes.
Yeah. So the strikes are ostensibly over pay and working conditions and things like that. But generally what's happening is crew are protesting the continued expansion of subsidiaries of Lufthansa Group, where you have airlines being started within airlines in order to have different pay rates for crew. So I would expect these to be over soon, but I won't expect these to be the last of the strikes that we see.
It's at this point, I'm surprised there aren't more and louder calls for the resignation of Carsten Spohr, because this has been going on for years and years and years. It is damaging to Lufthansa Group, as you just cannot rely on them to operate at any point, because at any moment, these strikes were not long planned. It's not like France where they pencil in their strikes for 6 months from now. These were all just sort of wildcat strikes, I would say. They were announced days ahead of time, not weeks or months. And it's like you said, Ian, it's not going away tomorrow, and it's going to keep happening. And then ironically, flights by these subcarrier airlines continue in spite of the strikes being because of those airlines. So Eurowings flights and Discover Airlines flights will keep operating, while mainline Lufthansa does not.
Is Lufthansa CityLine operating?
I believe it is.
So Lufthansa Prime and Lufthansa CityLine are not.
But not
Lufthansa City Airlines.
Which is different.
Sorry. Thank you.
How could you lose?
And Thursday, Eurowings pilots will also be on strike, but that is just Eurowings Germany, not Eurowings Europe.
So you can see why I'm surprised.
So if you're a passenger, it's crystal clear.
It's super clear. Yeah. As you can see, this is why I'm a little confused why no one's calling for his resignation, because it's just an unnecessary, sloppy mess. And you know what? I have an idea for a new CEO of Lufthansa Group. I'm not going to drop it just yet. We're going to wait until the very end of the next segment, but I've got an idea who could be the next.
All right. Well, let's get to that next segment now, because now I'm intrigued, Jason.
Okay.
It's a terrible idea.
It's a funny idea.
Let's stay in Germany and talk about what you two have seen. Let's refresh everyone's memory, because you weren't there last year. So let's refresh everyone's memory about where you are, what the purpose of the show is, and then let's talk about some of the things that you both have seen this week.
I'm going to let Seth take this segment.
Alrighty. We are at Aircraft Interiors Expo. If I recall correctly, this is the 25th edition of the event, and this is the preeminent gathering of vendors, customers, media, and others related to the aircraft interiors business, as the name implies.
Which is a lot more than you would think it is. It involves everything from not just the three topics we'll talk about, seats, screens, and Wi-Fi, but everything down to the thermoplastics used to mold the seats and the fasteners and the connectors that go into the wires that connect to other connectors. It's literally everything you put inside an airplane.
Yeah.
One of the most interesting conversations I had at AIX when I was there a few years ago was with the company that makes the cargo webbing straps.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing you would see here.
I believe it. We had a great chat with one of the companies that makes all the lighted placards and signs that you're obligated to.
I saw Jason's photo of that. We're going to link that in the show notes, because I would put that in my house.
Yeah, it's just a great collection, and there's a bunch of buttons. And Jason looks at me like, "Can I touch the buttons?" I'm like, "I'm pretty sure you can touch the buttons." And the guy came over, was like, "You should absolutely touch the buttons."
He's like, "I'm the button guy. I make sure those all work."
So it's really a bit of everything: life vests, safety rafts. Amphenol, which is one of the major players, makes connectors. They make the different pin-out connectors for all the electronics on an airplane, and they have a booth filled with different shapes and sizes of wires and connectors and ports and plugs. It's just, there's truly everything. I think typically it's 10 to 12,000 people show up during the week. It's a good time.
Less if Lufthansa's on strike.
Well, I said typically.
Yeah.
So we are here, and as Jason said, we focused on seats, screens, and Wi-Fi.
So what in the seats area of the show has been notable? In the past years, we've had some really positively notable things and some ideas where they get a lot of press, but are never, ever, ever going to happen. So what's worth talking about this year?
We're not going to talk about the latter, but we're going to talk about the former.
Yeah. My top thing for the show so far is in the seats category, which is a little weird because I'm usually more of a screens and Wi-Fi guy. But there's a product from Collins Aerospace called Skynook. And we've all been there at the back of a wide-body airplane. The fuselage starts to curve in. And that last row, or in some cases last two rows, instead of being 3 seats, is down to 2. Collins seems to think that these are considered bad seats on the planes. There's a lot of couples I know and airlines I know that charge extra because they're considered premium. Nonetheless, there is dead space between the seat and the fuselage sidewall, and no one in aviation hates anything more than they hate dead space on an airplane. Dead
space is an accountant's worst nightmare. It's space that they haven't monetized.
And so what we're seeing with Skynook is they've bolstered the armrest, and rather than just being a little plastic bit and metal bit sticking out, they've turned it into a convertible table. So normally it's vertical, looks and feels like an armrest. There's a magic button on it that the flight attendant will release and put it into a flat mode, and it extends the sort of seat at seat level to fill that half space. It's designed with mounting brackets for a bassinet or a seatbelt strap for a car seat is one of the use cases they've come up with. They also suggested you don't have to necessarily put it down. You could leave it up and have that space designated for a service animal.
Where I'd put my champagne if I were there.
Yes, you could strap in a
bucket of champagne,
but not during taxi, takeoff, and landing. They were very clear about that. It's not certified for that. And then the other facet of it that they talked about, which is also, it's modular, so airlines can pick and choose what they want. But on the aisle side of it, because there's always so much crowding around there, people waiting for the lab and such, there's the option for a small sliding door bit that extends out a few inches and gives you a bit of privacy when you're stuck and or have now paid extra for that last row.
Kind of turns it into like almost an economy suite, sort of, kind of. To be honest, I don't see that part of the equation ever coming out. I don't see any airline taking that, but the part where you have the armrest that comes up and extends out kind of seems like a no-brainer. I really like the part where they described how typically an infant in a bassinet is placed not just in the front row of the cabin where the seats are most premium and they charge extra for those, but they're raised up at head level, which then means if the baby's crying, that noise is above everyone seated on the aircraft, and it kind of radiates out through the entire cabin, whereas this puts it way in the back, down in the actual seat aisle, where that noise hopefully won't be transmitted as far as it would otherwise.
That's interesting to me. But Seth, you said that it wasn't certified for taxi, takeoff, and landing. So if you have a bucket or like a car seat that you would normally strap in to an extra seat, where would you put that? Would you be able to just store the bucket empty in that space?
Yeah, my understanding from the folks at Collins is that the car seat could be left there and strapped in, but the baby couldn't be in it.
Baby defaults back to an infant in arms during TTL.
And the alternative, I guess, it goes in an overhead or something
else.
The
baby?
Yes, Jason. The baby goes. Listen, it's a lot of space up there. It's very comfortable.
There you go.
Anyways, my understanding is that there's a plan for that the car seat or something else would go in an overhead and then come back down. But there is some certification bits that go into it. And as designed, I think if it's bassinet, it wouldn't necessarily be taxi, takeoff, and landing, right? Those come out.
Yeah. And did this win Crystal Cabin?
This did win the Crystal Cabin Awards. That's the other thing that happens at the show here.
Emmys, Oscars, whatever have you, of the aviation interiors ecosystem is basically the Crystal Cabin, and it's a very prestigious award.
Yeah. So they did win for the category they were nominated. I forget which, but
something.
Cabin somethings. So yeah, it's a really neat product, actually brings value to consumers. It's going to come at a cost.
Everything does.
But here we are.
Now we're going to shift to Recaro, who is one of the other big seat manufacturers. I actually don't know if they make more airplane seats versus like car seats.
I would assume car.
Car seats probably, but they're big. They're not new to this space by any means. They had two innovations. I guess you could call them innovations. One, they solved, or trying to solve, the very premium issue of unreliable wireless charging in premium seats, finally incorporating MagSafe into it. So I just plopped my phone down on the side thing and it stuck there with magnets and charged. And there's a little lip there in case the flight gets a little bouncy and your phone falls. So that's nice. But more interestingly, and I know, Seth, we mocked this fill in the word.
Mercilessly?
Mercilessly, there it is. Before the show, an AI voice recognition system to control the movements of a business class seat. And we mocked it a lot. And I hate to admit it, but I used it and the damn thing worked. It understood everything I threw at it, which, by the way, it understands, I think they said 91 or 97 different languages. I tossed all sorts of weird things, phrased things in strange ways, told it, I gotta go pee. And then it understood what I wanted to talk about, and it went up to the full upright position. If you put that strictly in a accessibility point of view, that's an interesting innovation. If you're just looking to cram the word AI into your seat, less so.
Yeah. And what I would say is, especially in an era where premium seat makers have moved away from typical physical buttons that we're used to hidden buttons. There's a way that they can do a translucent finish on the armrest.
Oh, I hate those capacitive,
you sort of wave your finger
buttons
over it and it lights up, and then the buttons are inside the armrest, but they're smooth, so you can't see them unless
all the
you sort
complexity of a button without any of the tactic feedback of a button.
So you really run into trouble in accessibility as well. And so, as Jason said, from an accessibility perspective, this is super cool. From a functional perspective and more broad adoption, it's a little janky.
It still had buttons. So
yeah, this implementation did,
but the next one might not.
Maybe not. So it's interesting, and it worked.
Cool. Ian, we're just going to keep on going because you have nothing really.
Keep on going.
We're just going to go. Screens, the good, the bad, and the ugly, I would say. The good is there's lots of new stuff coming out, and the aviation sector seems to have finally come to parity, at least right now, with display tech, which is ordinarily something we are way behind on. I mean, airlines were still installing resistive touch screens far into the era of the modern iPhone capacitive touchscreens. And if you have any idea what the difference is between the two, you know exactly how horrifying that is. But Thales announced an update to its main system that uses tandem OLED screens, which is the super high premium display tech that Apple uses in its most premium displays, which is super cool to see. But again, it won't be flying until 2029, I think.
It's 27, 28, 20. It's maybe delivered for retrofit in 28 and new delivers in 29, or retrofit late 27, retrofits early 29, whatever. But 28. Yeah. It's still a couple years away. The one thing I will say is part of this is because the companies truly believe in making their products better and want to deliver these brighter, lighter, better screens for passengers. Part of it is because they're buying screens off the same industrial lines that produce televisions and all the other electronic devices. And you get to a point where you can't buy them smaller anymore, so they have to put in bigger ones. You can't buy the old technology anymore, so you have to upgrade to the new ones. And by 2027, 28, 29, when these are going to start coming around, part of the driving force here is it's going to be really hard to get the older technology. So that's an interesting twist on why we're getting the really cool new stuff, and plays into the next topic, which is some really old screens that are getting an extension on their life.
Nice transition.
Right?
So over in Panasonic world, anyone who flies has almost certainly run into a Panasonic X1, X3 system, which is that black screen with the little red or white light in the middle. They're old. They're getting to be old. Some of them are upwards of probably 10 years old at this point, and you notice it when you start to use them now. They're functional, but they're getting long in the tooth. They're sluggish. They can't run the modern things, and I'm air quoting here, personalization that airlines want them to run.
And yeah, so one of the fun things about in-flight entertainment screens is they really are mini tablets, mini computers that are showing you movies, but also rendering the map, also doing...
They're just a fancy Android tablet.
Yeah, they're Android now. They weren't always.
They weren't always, but they are now.
And so the really neat thing that Panasonic is doing is they're taking these screens and disconnecting the motherboard with the processor and memory guts off the back, putting fresh processors with a GPU.
And a RAM boost from
a huge
2 or 4 to 16 gigs, which these days ain't cheap.
No. So a huge boost in RAM, huge boost in processing, huge boost in graphics. And they did a demo for us where they put an old one and a new one next to each other. And both guys hit the start the map button at the same time. One of them loaded. They did the full demo, like a minute-long monologue. And the other one was still loading the map.
Well, not only did the new one refreshed or refurbished monitor load, but it also was better because having the discrete GPU means they can do things that the old one can't. So it had some additional lighting effects, and it put the map in the loading screen or whatever, so you could actually see what you were loading into before it loaded. Things that would have absolutely demolished the old screens. We're calling them screens, but they're not screens. They're computers because the screen doesn't change.
Right. And that's the really interesting about it is the screen itself is the original screen. All the guts behind it are what changes. And I will say, sort of calling back to our conversation about Thales, their screen is architected now to do that more easily. The module for the external ports is separate from the memory, is separate from the screen. Panasonic also has a model that does that on their newer screens, but recognizing that more than 1 million of these old screens have been delivered and need some updates, and that's not going to happen to new products necessarily in the next few years. This gives airlines a chance to deliver a better passenger experience. Let us have a movie list that you can scroll through, and it actually goes when you swipe the screen instead of like 10 seconds later, and have that experience.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Is this something that manufacturers are looking at moving forward, where they're saying, okay, we know that we can extend the life of these screens because the screens aren't the issue. It's the hardware behind the screens. So are we moving to a more modular industry?
100%, because actually Panasonic again, and I think Thales does this as well, in their newest system called Astrova, they've actually offloaded all of this into a bar at the bottom of the monitor or display fixture where all of the guts, the processor, the GPU, the memory, it's in a bar that kind of doesn't hang off the bottom, but is distinctly separate. And to upgrade the entire thing, you pop that off, and 10 years, you pop a new one on, and suddenly you've got a much more modern system where today they have to completely uninstall, rip apart, put a new motherboard in. Should be, you just click off the old bar and you pop in a new one.
You're close. I don't think the GPU is in with the ports, but you get the idea.
Something along those.
They are much more modular of a design today, and they've planned for this. The Astrova system from Panasonic does it. This new Aura, A-U-R-A system from Thales does it. So Rave is the other big player in the market, has a similar thing. So there's a lot of that going on, but Panasonic is basically, after the fact, choosing to retrofit this modularity in.
We got one more screen thing to talk about, Ian.
All right.
What is your idea of just the worst possible screen on an airplane?
The worst possible screen on an airplane?
I'm going to answer the question for you. It's a screen that's in front of you that you can't turn off.
That was my thinking. What I was going to say is if you took the Ryanair seat back and made that a screen.
Were you looking at our feed today? Did you peek?
No, that I missed. Was
because the Ryanair seatback is a safety card.
Right. But like the brightness of it, that like super bright yellow plus safety card. Like if you made that a screen.
Okay, so Ian found a way to make it slightly worse than what we saw, because what we saw isn't that bright. But
in fact, it doesn't have any brightness at all, which is also an interesting twist. But Seth, what did Barana?
Barana is one of the in-flight entertainment companies that we spoke with today. They have a product that does a color e-ink display. So think Kindle or similar e-reader type of thing. There's a color version of it. That screen is super thin, super light, super low power, and they've put it in a seat back.
Yeah.
But that screen is also can't do video because it can't refresh fast enough. What it is really good at, though, is displaying advertising.
That's how they get you. So any old school JetBlue passengers or anyone unlucky enough to get on one of their old ancient A320s will remember the dreaded map channel. The one that was theoretically a map channel, but 90% of the time showed anything but the map. It was just ads. This has the potential to be very similar, but you can't turn it off. You can't make it go away. Like Seth said, it's a color e-ink display, which does not have its own backlight or front light. So it is completely reliant on ambient light. So at night, it won't make the whole cabin glow. In this current iteration, there's nothing stopping them from putting a back or front light on it, power, but it updates a maximum of every 15 seconds and takes about 5 seconds to completely redraw the page. But what they were showing is very much this is an ad platform for the back of the seat. It can do other things like show the safety card or show the moving map, but it is an advertising platform. And I hate it, but I also hate that I understand why some airlines might just do it.
I mean, I also hate it. However,
glad we're on the same page there.
Yeah, I would absolutely hate to have this in front of my face. But I can definitely understand. I mean, obviously, it's going to become an ad platform. But I could see where the argument is we have the buy on board menu or the safety card or, and I'm not sure how updatable this is in flight, connection information or something like that.
Those are many of the use cases that were talked about. Connection information is in fact one of them.
But the aircraft has to have connectivity to do that. And the airlines that this would be pitched at don't have that.
Maybe, maybe not. Some do.
Maybe.
Southeast Asia, there are definitely some very low-cost carriers that I could see this flying on that do have connectivity.
Just say AirAsia. It's fine.
It's one of them. This is bad but good. Maybe not good. Bad but understandable. I get it. Also,
it seems to fill a space.
Yeah. The one thing I will say, one of the guys we were talking to from the vendor said is, you see plenty of seat backs or tray tables with a sticker on it already. And I also don't like those, but I understand.
Yeah, but the sticker doesn't change every 15 seconds.
Or 5 minutes or whatever it is. I think it's the fact that it changes visually, even if you're not really looking at it, something changing will catch your eye.
Yes.
And that's a very different mental, physical reaction to the experience.
Yes.
So that's one of my big concerns with it. But, right now it is still a concept. They've been very clear about that. They're working through a lot of the engineering considerations and, how big will it be and how much is it going to cost and all those things to make sure it's a good idea. But it's out there.
And speaking of things that are bad, but I understand why they are sometimes bad, is in-flight Wi-Fi. That's generally been the case for a decade plus at this point. Airplane Wi-Fi is bad, but we understand why it's bad. But it's, dare I say, less bad, verging on good now. Seth, you're much more involved in the Wi-Fi space now. What's the quick hits?
Yeah, what I would say is we are seeing a pretty aggressive shift to more powerful is the wrong word, satellite constellations with more capacity. We are seeing a shift to more efficient antenna hardware that makes it possible for airlines to deliver it. And we're seeing a shift towards faster installations of that hardware. And finally, we're seeing airlines willing to iterate systems more quickly than they were in the past. The original in-flight connectivity contracts were often 10-year contracts with the expectation you'd install this hardware and it would be what you use for connectivity for 10 years. If you're still flying on a Delta 717, you're meeting that target.
Yes, you understand that pain.
But that system is a decade old at this point. But the newer systems, not only are they better, faster, more usable, more fun, in many cases now more free, which isn't really a word, but we'll go with it. The airlines have shown, when American switched over to Viasat from most of their 2KU, they did it. They broke their contract to get there faster. Delta is doing things more quickly. United is installing Viasat on some planes and then very quickly replacing that with the Starlink system much faster than even a 2-year cycle in some cases. So, and we're seeing it, in Europe as well, in Asia as well. There is a push towards this more, better, faster. And the vendors we talked to this week, I won't say had any sort of groundbreaking news about this stuff. Certainly not that we're going to see flying suddenly in the next 12 or 18 months. But a little past that, Amazon Leo, talked to the guys and they've got an antenna product now. They're not manufacturing, but they've got the specs and the mounting bits sorted out with that they're working on, with Boeing and Airbus. They're moving in that direction in a way that will get us to this, I think, this pace of improved connectivity continuing to improve with remarkable speed.
I'd take away from that, from my perspective, because I'm not as immersed in this as either of you are, I take away the more free is where I'm a bit excited about.
And not everywhere all the time. There are absolutely some airlines that aren't going there, or will be messaging only, and you've got to put messaging in big air quotes there, because what messaging is to you might not be the same to me, and which app works and whatever, and are we using the same one? But we are seeing it, and there's even some ultra low cost carriers and low cost carriers in Europe are starting to get on board, albeit not free. But Volotea is rolling out Wi-Fi fleet-wide this year. Later this year, almost all their planes will have a WhatsApp tier service. So it's not high speed, but it's going to be there. And one of their planes is going to be trialing a high-speed service. So places you wouldn't expect to have seen it, it's happening.
We'll see where we go. We've been here before where we say, hey, this new system is finally fast enough for me to do whatever we want. And that same system 5 years later is damn near unusable. So we're at the top point of a new arc in this industry where there's a new thing on the block and it works and it's great and everyone really wants it. But let's check back in with Seth in 5 years to see how it's going.
We'll make a note of that to check back in. At the beginning of this conversation, we teased a possible replacement for the CEO of Lufthansa. And Jason, I really need you to explain to me what it is you're on about.
Lufthansa, at least in public, is not looking for a new CEO right now, even though they should be. Lufthansa Group is not looking for a new CEO. But remember Akbar Al-Baker in the previous...
How could I forget?
How could you forget that man's skull? But there are unconfirmed reports that he has been walking around the show this week, and he has not been seen in many years. He has not, as far as we know, taken up any role anywhere since he departed from Qatar Airways, but apparently he's back and maybe in some sort of airline leadership capacity, but that's totally unconfirmed conjecture, speculation, show, rumor that we did not see him. But
the person who told us that they saw him, I believe, yes. And another person, unprompted in response to that conversation, suggested that they had heard about the likely new employer, but neither was willing to spill the beans.
So you heard it here first. He could be back.
He could be back. Interesting. Let's talk about another airline CEO. This time, it's Scott Kirby over at United Airlines.
Every time Scott Kirby talks, I like him less.
Well, in this particular instance, what he did was suggest a merger between United Airlines and American Airlines. And that has led to a flurry of reports on what would the merger mean for United and American? What would it mean for airlines? And there are a lot of very serious people taking this seriously because that's their job. Thankfully, that's not our job. We don't have to take this seriously because it is unserious.
It's deeply unserious. And who did he propose this possible merger of definitely not equals to?
We don't exactly know how this came about or who else was there, but the initial reporting was from Bloomberg. Bloomberg initially reported it, and they're saying that Kirby suggested this as part of a conversation. We're not sure what else they were discussing back in February with President Trump and possibly other lawmakers. The White House today said they're not commenting on this at this point, and it's not actually a thing. No one has actually suggested this is happening, but there has been just a vast amount of what could it mean speculative reporting, which I get for some people,
for your children in their school news at 11, basically stuff like that, just ridiculous stuff.
If someone makes a legal move, if there is an SEC filing to this effect, then we'll talk about it. Yes. But until then, this is an unserious proposal.
This went very mainstream. Yesterday, even my dad texted me. Hi, Dad. He texted me, UAL-AMR merger, ? No way, with 2 exclamation points. So if my dad's any indication, this merger will not be a real thing, and nor would it go through. But I just hate that we even have to talk about it because it's so damn stupid. Can United gobble up another airline like JetBlue? Yeah, maybe. But who would want to acquire American with the amount of unbelievable debt they have and all other sorts of issues. I mean, American's a fine airline. I don't want to bash them too much on their 100th anniversary, but that merger would just be a disaster.
I still think if anything comes from it, I think this is a setup for a smaller acquisition.
I'm not even sure if it's a setup for that, but I think there is a smaller acquisition coming down the line.
Yes, this might just be, we can't have the main course, but we could take the appetizer, setting it up for that kind of justification.
Yeah. Earlier this week, a retiring Icelandair pilot decided that they wanted to celebrate their final flight with a low pass, very, very low pass over their hometown. They didn't get clearance from anybody, ATC or the actual airline, and now it sounds like they might be in trouble. I don't think Icelandair is going to fire them, but I'm not sure what they can do, but it sounds like there could be some disciplinary action here.
Yeah, I saw the reports. I saw some of the videos on it. I've obviously seen the tracking data available. If I understand correctly, it actually dropped low enough behind a hill mountain.
It dropped low enough behind there's a cliff on one side of on the north side of the island, and all of the Flight Radar 24 receivers are on to the north. So we lost coverage behind the cliff. So they went low enough to go out of coverage.
That would suggest it was pretty darn low.
Yeah, and I mean, there's video to show exactly how low it was.
The cliff is 200 and some odd meters, and they were below that.
Yeah, so not great for anyone. You say they can't fire him because he's on his last flight, but I'm not sure that's entirely true because you still got to put your paperwork in for retirement. And I don't know how pensions work in Iceland, but if you get fired on your last day, maybe you don't get that pension. I don't know, but it's tremendously stupid, especially if you haven't gone through any procedures. The airline doesn't know. What if they had a bird strike when they were approaching this coastal Icelandic town? There are real reasons why you don't want to do this. And this is, to me, way worse than the 2017 honorary flyover of the last long-haul Air Berlin flight, which I remember at the time, dating myself quite a bit here, was quite a to-do. That pilot got suspended, even though it was presumably their last flight with the airline. That was over the terminal, I believe. So a different situation because that was at an airport. It may have been approved by ATC, but not by the airline. But this was completely out of bounds. You do not do this. I think we forgot to say this was a commercial flight with passengers, an international flight from Germany, I think, came out of Frankfurt.
This was the pilot's last operating flight. This wasn't a special flight of any kind.
This was a commercial flight, which raises the stakes a lot here. Because this is, if you're, moving the aircraft or it's a non-rev flight, whatever, you're going to get away with a lot more. But if you're doing this with a commercial flight with revenue passengers, that's got all sorts of other implications. And it's not good for anyone. As cool as it would have been to see and do, if it's not authorized, that's a really stupid thing to do.
Yeah, I don't recommend this. By all means, I would love it if they had secured proper permissions and all of those things. But don't buzz the tower.
Yes, this was very much, I assume, a beg for forgiveness rather than ask for permission, because you're never going to get that permission.
Negative Ghost Rider?
Yes, the pattern is very full of seagulls and Icelandic people saying, what the hell is that?
Exactly. Let's move on to the governmental affairs portion of the show. The United States House of Representatives has passed the ALERT Act. This is a different version of the ALERT Act than the one that we talked about in February that the NTSB was very, very, very against because it did not include mandates for ADS-B in, which the Senate's competing Rotor Act did. This version of the ALERT Act, which passed the House yesterday on the 14th of April, is inclusive of ADS-B in and ties the ADS-B in requirement to the implementation of ACAS-X, which is an iteration of the existing TCAS system. So it ties ADS-B in requirements to collision avoidance. So bringing everything together. The Rotor Act and the past ALERT Act, the Senate has passed the Rotor Act. So these two are still quite different. And so there's going to be some negotiation between the Senate and the House to figure out what eventually gets put into law. And as we saw back in February, they're pretty far apart. So I'm going to be very interested to see what makes it through, if anything comes of this, because they're so far apart at this point.
Yeah. Why would this pass, but the last iteration that the NTSB actually wanted to pass didn't pass? I can't square that.
That's what's interesting to me, because there were a number of criticisms of the Rotor Act by sponsors in the House that it mandated certain things by certain deadlines, and they weren't going to be able to be met, and they were going to be too costly. And then the Past Alert Act now includes most of those things. I'm not exactly sure how we square this circle, but
I don't know.
Somehow they'll have to figure it out.
What else is going on in Congress?
Elsewhere in Congress, the Senate Commerce Committee is advancing the Mental Health in Aviation Act. This bill is a rough outline of the 2024 report from the FAA's own Mental Health and Aviation Medical Clearances Committee. And what this bill does is attempts to change the current system around pilot and air traffic controller mental health, because the current system has long been criticized as penalizing anyone who requires an FAA medical clearance from speaking truthfully about any mental health issues whatsoever. Currently, to get an FAA medical, you have to tell the examiner if you have ever sought even talk therapy. So if your, spouse dies and you want to process that and go talk to a professional about how to process your grief, you have to tell the medical examiner, and you could possibly lose your pilot's or controller's license. This bill aims to change that. It also aims to change a wider issue, which is dealing with approved mental health medications and kind of standardizing the system so that pilots and controllers can take care of their own mental health and not have fear of losing their license.
It's ridiculous that this is only now being considered and hopefully passed in 2026. A lot has changed in decades past on mental health and seeking out mental health care, and to have people in this industry so starkly afraid to even attempt to seek out mental health care for fear of just losing their career, not just, being suspended or anything, but outright having their career taken from them is ridiculous. And hopefully this sails right through Congress and gets actually mandated, because it's just, I hate that we're still talking about this, because we've seen what happens multiple times, unfortunately, when a pilot or any other aviation employee doesn't get the mental health care that they need. They can hurt themselves, or unfortunately, they can hurt others in the process. And it happens, and people need to be able to talk about it. And hopefully this is passed without delay.
Yeah, I really hope that it moves through Congress very quickly. The weather, especially in the Midwest where I am, has been very active, shall we say, this spring. And unfortunately, the Madison Air Traffic Control Tower got absolutely destroyed by either just severe storms or possibly a tornado. And it does not look great. And this is just a reminder that very tall towers in the middle of tornado-prone areas, this can happen.
Yeah, this was Madison, Wisconsin, right, Seth?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I got to say, looking at we've seen one picture of the interior of this space, sort of dropped roof, definitely showing signs of water damage and some stuff falling out and, systems covered in tarps and such. But my main concern at this point is I know there's a limited number of spare parts and, replacements available, and this is pretty old technology. I'm sure there's a way to get it back online, but how?
What we're looking at here seems to be a very dated, possibly vacuum tube driven system. I wouldn't be shocked. I don't know. It looks really yellow and old.
The case definitely looks yellow and old. It looks like some of the screens have been replaced with
maybe
some old school LCDs, LEDs.
Either way, it looks like,
I don't know. It's just, we've all known this for a long time. The ATC system in the United States is old.
Maybe Madison, Wisconsin just got its fast pass ticket to a completely upgraded ATC system, but it's not going to happen.
There isn't a system that's brand new to upgrade to. That's the problem.
Yeah, there is that, isn't there? So maybe no more airplanes in Madison for a while.
There's always backup systems. There's portable ones that the military has that if they had to, they could bring in. There are ways to get the airport up and running. I'm not worried that like Madison will no longer have air service, but this is just a reminder of how challenging it is to keep these systems running, and especially when you need a full replacement or significant replacement. It's nice to have spares, and I can't imagine we've got a lot.
Yeah, this isn't as easy as, rolling a new Dell laptop and plugging it into the dock. This is very specialized, old equipment that they probably have to make by hand at this point themselves, which reinforces the need to update the ATC system, which, to be fair, even if, a modern system is destroyed by a tornado, it's not coming back online the following day, but this makes it a whole lot more difficult and slow.
Right. Let's talk ultra long haul, Jason and Seth.
Okay.
The first A350 1000 ULR for Qantas's Project Sunrise has been fully assembled and is almost ready for its first flight. That's all I got on that one.
Okay. I feel like we've been talking about Project Sunrise for as long as we've been having this podcast.
I'm really hoping that the sun actually rises soon, so things are progressing.
What is this thing?
Will it be in the east, at least, Ian?
Yet we have not moved the sun yet.
Okay, fair. Project Sunrise, 1000 ULR, designed to fly Sydney to London or New York nonstop.
Yes.
I understand why. I also don't really think I'd want to be in the plane that long.
No.
I've done Newark to Singapore. It's a really, and I guess a couple more hours at that point. What's the difference? But it still seems like an awful lot.
When we talk about lead times for things, we've been talking about Project Sunrise forever, it feels like. Years and years and years and years. We've also been talking for how many years, gentlemen, guess, have we been talking about Air New Zealand's Skynest? When was the first time we mentioned this? Do you remember?
So was that a pre or post-COVID thing, Seth?
I believe it was pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID? I thought post-COVID, more like a 2021 thing. Ian, what's the reality?
It was COVID. They announced this before COVID was COVID.
Oh.
We talked about this on episode 78 on February 28th, 2020, where we led the show with cancellations in China, outbreaks in South Korea, Iran, and Italy.
I'm sure it will be fine. Don't worry about it. Oh, wait.
And so 6 years later, we're finally getting to the point where we know where those things are going to fly and how much they're going to cost and some actual booking details. So what we're talking about is Air New Zealand's Skynest, which is a set of bunks in the middle of the economy cabin that you can purchase for a nap. You can spend $500 for a 4-hour block of time to sleep in a bunk. It's got some purple mood lighting to go along with the Air New Zealand theme. You get a nice little amenity kit, and you can book that for the flights between Auckland and JFK. It'll start flying on 2 of Air New Zealand's Dreamliners in November. Tickets for those flights will be bookable on the 18th of May.
Yay.
Seth, don't sound so excited.
Thank you for chiming in, Seth.
I mean, that's not why they pay them the big bucks, folks. I mean, I give Air New Zealand credit for giving this a go. I think that the numbers don't math to me, but I'm sure someone somewhere will buy it.
So this is, what did we say? Was it $400 or $500 for the 4-hour block?
$500. It's $125 an hour.
$125 an hour. Seth, you often tell me that the high-end price point you are willing to pay for a business class upgrade is about $100 an hour.
Correct.
This is beyond $100 an hour. And it's just a bunk. And you don't get any of the other stuff that you would get in business class. And it's only for 4 hours on a flight that's 3 times longer.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, the other stuff, the meal, the lounge, whatever, take or leave a little bit. Obviously, I enjoy them when I have access, but what I want is the sleep. But what I want is sleep, not a short nap. And even on the shortest flights, I'd like to pretend I could sleep more than that. But a 4-hour window, maybe not exactly when you want it. Maybe you only get the first 4 hours. Maybe you only get the last 4 hours. There's some challenges there when you'd want the opposite. And it is at a price point, admittedly, if I only have to pay for 4 hours of the flat bed when I, can handle my regular seat for the other 8, maybe I quote unquote save some money. But I think I also look at it as it is almost certainly a more expensive nap than the hotel that you are checking in of or checking out of that night.
Yeah.
And that's a tough sell to me.
And realistically, if you book this thing for 4 hours, you ain't getting 4 hours of sleep because there's still going to be plenty of noise. People literally climbing up over you to get to the bunk that is above you or below you or whatever. So generously, you're going to get a couple hours sleep at max, if possible. I mean, I think there's like a little part of the monument that your head tucks into, but it's still not going to be quiet. It's still not going to be dark. Temperature is going to be whatever it's going to be. But the price point, I understand that Air New Zealand's going to start high, see what demand is, drop it if they need to, and play around with it a bit. But they've had, nearly a decade at this point to research it and figure it out. So if they're pricing it here, they're probably going to get what they think they're going to get.
We shall see. Tickets go on sale May 18th for flights beginning November.
One clarification, not a ticket, the ability to book it, because you cannot book this as a ticket. It is an ancillary above and beyond what you've already paid for economy.
Naps for sale starting May 18th for flights beginning November. Let's close the show by welcoming home the crew of Artemis II. We talked last week about some of those amazing pictures and some of the aircraft following the launch. The welcome home was even more well followed. There were more than 18 aircraft in the area, but there were 18 aircraft in the area around the splashdown zone that were followed more than 100,000 times on Flight Radar 24. And those 18 aircraft were followed a total of more than 5 million times by people all over the world. And I was just so heartened by the fact that so many people were invested in this.
Yeah, even here in Hamburg, there is a billboard out on the side, an electronic billboard out on the sidewalk outside our hotel. And one of the rotating pieces of news was the Artemis splashdown, which is pretty cool. People pay attention when cool, happy, good, fun things happen. And this was certainly that.
Yes. And so I think we just end the show right there. Jason and Seth from Hamburg, thank you both so very much for taking the time out of your very, 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 very busy week to come and sit and do the show. I really appreciate it. And everyone else, we will see you next week. This has been episode 366 of AvTalk. I am Ian Petchnick, here as always with
Jason Rabinowitz, also this time with
Seth Miller. Auf Wiedersehen.
Thanks for listening.